So in today's live lesson, we're going to be talking about the baritone ukulele, and specifically we're going to be talking about 3 myths surrounding it. And those myths that we're going to talk about, the first one is that the baritone ukulele is totally different than a standard ukulele. The second myth is that it's basically just a guitar. And the third myth is that the baritone is more advanced than a standard ukulele. So let's start with that first myth, which is that it's totally different from a standard ukulele. A lot of times people are very intimidated about the baritone because they feel like it's a completely different instrument. They might as well be picking up a guitar or a mandolin or banjo or something else. But what's really cool is if you play ukulele and you play low-G ukulele, then everything that you play just works on the baritone. And that's because the intervals between the strings are exactly the same. Now, the notes themselves are in fact different, but the intervals are identical. And that means whatever you play on a low-G ukulele will work on a baritone. It'll just be in a different key. To kind of showcase this, excuse me, here's my low-G ukulele. One of the first things I ever learned how to play on the low-G ukulele and on ukulele in general was Malagueña, really cool, flamenco-inspired piece. Let me bring the camera down. Sounds something like this. Awesome sound, right? Really good on low G. This just doesn't sound nearly as good on high G, right? That's because of the bass note here. But I'm going to actually take this. I'm going to put it down for a second. I'm going to pick up my baritone, and I'm going to do the exact same thing. Exact same notes. Well, at least fret the same notes. Sounds like this. Same thing, right? Bring the camera up. Same but different. What do I mean by that? Well, the thing I'm playing is the same. It still sounds like Malagueña, but now I'm playing it in a different key because the baritone has different string tones than the high G ukulele does. Now, if you're familiar with the circle of fifths and fourths, which we've done some lessons on here before live on Rock Class, but if you're familiar with it, when you're playing a chord on your baritone ukulele, but you're thinking about a standard ukulele, all that you have to do is go 1 to the right to figure out what chord it is you're playing. So if I were to play a C chord on my standard ukulele, which just looks like this, right? With my ring finger on the 3rd fret of the A string, that's my C chord on a standard ukulele. If you look at a circle of fifths or fourths and you go 1 to the right, you'll see it's a G, which is what this is on a baritone ukulele. So a C chord on a tenor is a G chord on a baritone, but it still works. It still sounds like a major chord because it still is a major. And if I play my C, F, and G7 to C on a baritone, it's now going to be just, again, clicked 1 over, so it's going to be G to C to D7 to G. But you hear it still works and sounds good because it's the same perspective for the tuning. It's still the same intervals between the actual strings themselves. In fact, if you were to put a capo on a baritone ukulele at the 5th fret, it's just a low G instrument. Now if I were to play, oh man, this might be hard. I should have tried this before. But if I play Malagueña now all the way up here, so I'm barring across 5, I'm imagining that's my new 0, then it would be something like... If I grab the low G again, you can hear. Same thing, right? So all that the baritone really is doing is it's giving you all of this extra space to play more chords. The same chord shapes that you already know and love, just in a different position. In fact, bring the camera up. There's a great book. I think I got a copy of it here. This is one of my all-time favorites. I use it in lessons all the time. It's Lyle Ritt's Ukulele Masters by Jumpin' Jim. And what I want to show you from it is that the at the very beginning of the book, it actually talks about standard ukulele and then tenor and baritone. They actually clump them together, which I think is kind of cool, because it's different when this was written or how Lyle worked on it, whatever else. But the point I'm trying to make here is that they will actually show, and I can't show the whole thing for copyright reasons, but if I can get this in focus, you can see that they have standard versions of chords and then baritone versions of chords. But what you'll notice is they are different to sound the same, but they're both shapes that are familiar to play on each instrument. What that means is, yeah, to play with a standard ukulele, you will have to use different shapes. The shapes you are playing are the same shapes that you learned on the ukulele. It just seems like a different chord. If you're playing on your high G ukulele or low G ukulele and you say, hey, Matt, I'm playing the C chord, I'm going to have to play this as my C chord, but this is an F. It's still a chord that you know, just different names. It can be a little confusing when you're playing with other people, but if you're playing by yourself, it's really not that intimidating when you kind of just let go about what all the names are and you just start playing what you already know. That's what I did when I picked up the baritone ukulele. I got one and I immediately fell in love with the tone, and my brain broke immediately trying to figure out what all these chords are called. And I kind of let go of it a little bit and just started playing and thinking how I would with a high G ukulele, and then just realizing, oh, well, they got different names, but it still sounds good, right? And so I did a baritone album recently of different tunes that we'll have linked down below that you can check out if you're interested. And one of the tunes that I wrote for it, called Old and New, when I wrote it on a baritone, playing baritone, listening to baritone, but I thought of it like a low G piece. So when I was playing it, I was thinking of it as like an F to a G to a D to an A type of sound. And that's not what it is on a baritone. It's actually going to be, going C to D to A, to E. It's different, but I didn't need to think that way to write it. I could just play what I knew from low G and it still works. Again, if I'm playing with another artist and I have to communicate to them what I'm doing, yes, it is a little more tricky, but to play it still works. And to play a little bit of that tune for you, it sounds something like this. And just so you can hear it, here it is on a low G, which I recently did a sound sample for Connie Leia on one of their platinum models when I was in Hawaii a few months ago, and they asked me to do a sound sample on a low G, and I don't normally play low G. Well, I play baritone more now, so I just played my baritone stuff, and it worked out pretty well. Isn't that neat? Bring the camera back up. So the ukulele is the ukulele, whether you're playing soprano, concert, tenor, or baritone. They are all part of the same ecosystem of instruments, and all are, cross-compatible in terms of how you play their chords in terms of shapes. So the second myth is that it's basically just a guitar. And I get it. And I get it because if you play guitar, the strings on a guitar go E, A, D, G, B, E. And the strings on a baritone ukulele go D, G, B, E, which means it is actually the same as the first four strings of a guitar, the four highest pitched strings on a guitar. They are the same. And the baritone ukulele, no one really knows the exact history of it. It doesn't have a single inventor, but usually I believe it's Herc Favilla that's credited as sort of the creator of it in the late 1940s. And then it was Arthur Godfrey that made it really popular, around that time. The ukulele was already pretty popular, and so the baritone just kind of opened it up to another environment. And so whether or not it was created to be a little bit of a step into guitar, I don't know. And could you do that? Well, sure, but you could also do that with a standard tenor ukulele too, right? The baritone ukulele and the tenor ukulele have more in common than they do differences. In fact, I would argue that a baritone and a tenor are more in common by a lot than a baritone to a guitar. And a couple of the reasons why on this include the actual way that you play the instrument in terms of its scale length, which means the distance from, the nut to the saddle, and the spacing of the strings. You see, guitars, I don't have one in my studio here because I'm an ukulele player, not a guitarist. The strings are much closer together on the guitar, and the frets are much further apart, which means, well, it's kind of the worst of both worlds, right? You have less room between where your fingers can go, and you have to spread them out further this way because the frets are so wide. So what's nice about a baritone ukulele is it follows the same sort of methodology as your standard tenor. Just it's a little bit bigger, sure, but it still has the nice string spacing in between and has frets that are, while more wide than a tenor ukulele, much more narrow than like a guitar does. And while the baritone can be a great way to start to learn how to play guitar voicings, it does feel quite a bit different because of these differences. In addition to that, the tone is much different than a guitar. Standard guitars typically are going to be steel string, more often than not, right? And that tonality is very, very different than the tone of a nylon or fluorocarbon string instrument like this ukulele. Now they do make nylon string guitars like classical guitars, and you'll find tonally they are more similar to baritone ukuleles, but it sounds like a uke. You've got this more warm, mellow sound because of the way the body is, and because of the styles of strings that are used. What's really interesting to me is the sustain of a baritone ukulele. It's very different than guitar. I find that when I play guitar, which I don't really do much of, as I mentioned before, I'm not really a guitarist, I'd always feel like I'm missing something with just the way the overtones are and such, because my style of playing is more suited for the ukulele. And so I thought I didn't like baritone ukulele because of that until I got one, and then I realized, whoa, like this is just like more of my ukulele sound rather than, some sort of half guitar, right? And to go with that, I think that there's a lot of unique textures to the ukulele that you just don't get when you're playing with a guitar. The way the overtones sing and just the way the body resonates. This is distinctly ukulele, just lower in its tone. So definitely not just a guitar. It is tuned like one in some ways, but it is distinctly ukulele. Now, the third myth here is that the baritone is more advanced. And this is a really important one, I think, to touch on, because I teach a lot of private lessons, and that's been my bread and butter now for over 15 years. I absolutely love doing it. And when I got a baritone ukulele, a lot of my students were very interested in what I thought of it because they didn't have one and whatever else. And about half the students that had the interest, were like, oh, maybe I'll get one. What do you think? And then the other half that were interested had this sort of attitude of, well, when I get better, I'll get a baritone. Like, I'm not good enough for the baritone yet. And I think this is a sentiment that a lot of people share, because learning a musical instrument is very intimidating. And when you're already struggling with the ukulele, the standard ukulele, and then it's like, oh yeah, I get a baritone, all your shapes are different, it can be really, really intimidating. But I strongly suggest, if you're at all interested in baritone ukulele, go try one or go buy one if you can. You're going to have a blast when you let go of your expectation and just start to make music with it. This is something I even had the attitude of. When I first got a baritone ukulele, I've got this Oli ukulele, and I absolutely love these ukes. And the man who runs Oli Ukulele, Andrew, who also runs the ukulele site, he was encouraging me to try baritone when I was on the ukulele site podcast a couple of years ago, almost a couple of years ago now. And I was reluctant because I was like, I'm still struggling with high G over here. Like I feel like there's so much more I can do before I'm ready to learn how to play baritone. And he really encouraged me, like, oh, just try it. And he put one of the Oli baritones in my hands. And I was like, oh, this is kind of cool. And then I started playing low G type stuff that I normally would play. And it was just this huge, awesome sound. And I absolutely loved it. And yes, my fingers did have to stretch a little bit more for some chords, but I had to push, well, less hard in a lot of ways than I did with other instruments. In fact, I found the baritone to be a little bit easier to fret in some ways. It's a little easier to see where your fingers are going. You've got a little bit more space for those fingers to squeeze in. And I actually found a lot of things that I thought would be really challenging with this instrument ended up not just being easier than I thought, but easier than they were on a standard ukulele. And everyone's hands are different. Everyone's, experience is going to be different. But you might find that playing a baritone actually makes certain chords easier than you would play on like your standard low G ukulele. You might find that having a little bit more space to put the fingers actually gives you more clarity with your tone as you're learning to strike the strings and play the instrument, which is pretty neat because, I think people get really intimidated thinking that they have to play it a certain way to create that type of sound, when really you just have to try it, see how it goes, and see if it fits you. And you don't have to be a certain skill level for that to happen with. Ron just said in the chat, I don't have a very big stretch with my fretting hand. The tenor is hard for me and baritone's even harder. Absolutely. I absolutely hear you with that. But one thing I'll also say with that is, if you are playing things a little bit more narrowly on the baritone, the tone is so much wider that you might still end up liking it. In fact, with this baritone album that I did, a number of the tunes I tried to utilize like open strings on. And Ron also said, so you're saying I could buy the baritone EP book and then just play all the pieces on my low G concert uke playing solo and that would sound good? Does changing the key make any of them sound funny? So this was a comment from a few minutes ago. I just saw it now. The baritone EP tab book is the book I did of these tunes I wrote for my baritone album. And yes, you can play them all with a low G concert and they'll sound a little different. They'll just be in different keys, but it'll be the same song, just in a different key. And the reason I bring up this tab book seemingly randomly right now is because one of the tunes that I play in it is called Drifting. And the point of this tune, if I bring the camera down, was for me to play the bass strings as my centric strings and my treble strings as drone strings. You see, when I play high G ukulele, I do the opposite a lot. Whenever I'm playing high G ukulele, I'm using the G and C strings as these sort of drone notes. And it's just this really cool, interesting sound. So when I get the baritone, you can't really do that because the low strings are so much more droney. It gets muddied when you play that same exact style. So I had the thought, I'm going to write a piece that uses the bass strings for movement while I use the treble strings to drone. And that tune I called Drifting. My wife named it when I played it for her. She said, it sounds like we're just off drifting into space. I was like, that's perfect. But I'm going to play it a little bit of it for you right now. And it looks and sounds like this. Now what's cool about this piece, there's a lot of different ways that you can finger these notes, but it's just two strings playing at a time. The only time I break that form is at the very end here. I add one extra note. But that's simple, right? There's a lot of nuance to playing a piece like that for sure, but overall it's relatively simple. I'm just fretting two notes on my two bass strings while I pick it. And the tonality of that with a baritone, I don't get that with my other ukes. If I play that same piece on the low G, it still sounds good. It still works. Still works for the tune. Bringing the camera down. But it's much thinner. It still sounds nice. It still has a beautiful tone and texture, but I think it's easier to play this piece on the baritone. And I think it sounds much better on that tuning too. The bigger space of the baritone gives me more space for my fingers to move and to kind of make sure I'm not touching the strings incidentally, which gives me more of that legato, that really flowing feel. And I think it's easier to play that tune on the baritone and even sounds a little bit better. So the baritone's not a more advanced instrument than your standard ukulele. It's just a little bit different while keeping a lot of the same concepts at play. I think that a lot of fretting is actually easier with a baritone. The wider frets can be more difficult in some ways, but it's also just, I don't know, there's something about the baritone that I find a little bit easier in some ways than others. So the baritone's no more difficult than the tenor is to the concert to the soprano. It's just, different sizes for different people, for different hand shapes and sizes, and for different preferences as players. So if you've been on the fence to getting a baritone ukulele, please just try it. Just for me, please try it. I'm a huge fan of baritone. I've been playing it a ton recently. I did that album, the Baritone EP, which you can find linked down below. It's on Apple Music and Spotify and all that stuff. But it's been such a joy to play, and I'm really thankful that Andrew kind of pushed me to try it because I was intimidated by it, and I thought it was basically just a small guitar, and I was wrong. And that is the 3 different myths, really. I experienced all 3 of these myths when I was learning this and getting excited about playing the baritone ukulele. So just again, those 3 myths are: it's totally different than a standard ukulele. All your chord shapes still work, right? It's basically just a guitar. Yes, it is tuned similarly, but there are more differences between this to the guitar than there are similarities in terms of its size, its shape, the fret width, the string distance, nut width, all that stuff. And that baritone is more advanced. It's no more advanced than a soprano to a concert to a tenor. It's just another style to play, and you might find that the baritone is even easier than some others. Now, I got some comments in chat that just kind of started popping up on the screen, so I'm going to go ahead and go through it. Tracy says, coming through loud and clear, excellent, glad. YouTube Steve said, audio and video are great, excellent. Then YouTube Steve said, baritone is my nighttime ukulele. The lower register just seems more mellow and conducive to late night playing. I love that. That's awesome. Yeah, I totally get that. It's more like a lullaby sung by a tenor or or something like that. It's just a really nice sound. I'll tell you right now that when I play baritone ukulele, I barely ever strum. When I play high G ukulele, I'm strumming all the time. And the reason is just because I feel like my style changes to the style of ukulele a little bit more. All my techniques are still ukulele techniques. I use the same techniques on this that I do on a high G. I just use certain techniques more. And I pretty much am always doing 3-finger style with the baritone, and very rarely do I strum. The only piece that I strum on is that one drifting I mentioned before, where I'm droning, and I'll actually end up droning the strings up high to almost make it sound more like a high G ukulele, which is kind of cool. But for the most part, I'm always finger picking, so I like that a lot. YouTube Steve also says, Matt, seems like there are more different scale lengths than on baritone than other ukulele sizes. Do you know if that's the case or why? I don't know enough to answer that question. So off the top of my head, I believe a baritone is a 19-inch scale, but I could very well be wrong on that. The scale lengths is not my forte. I do know that the scale length is in fact bigger, but I do not know if there's a wider variation with baritones than tenors. I do know that tenors have wide variations too, 17-inch, 17.5-inch, 18-inch. There can be these different scale lengths even between makers. So I'm not sure on that front, but there could be. I don't think it's a baritone specific thing as much as it's just as you get to a bigger ukulele, builders are going to play more with scale lengths to create different tone profiles. Tiki Dave says, beautiful sounding Barry. I think every player should have both in their arsenal. It also helps flesh out groups while playing together and gives a new dimension to sound. Absolutely. I totally agree. If I could only have 2 ukuleles, I'd pick a high G and a baritone. Sorry, low G. Don't get me wrong. I like low G, but sorry, that's no brainer in my opinion. For me personally, high G and baritone. It gives me kind of the best of both worlds. And I really like what you're mentioning about flesh out groups while playing together. So I've been doing some collaboration work with Sammy, 4-string boy, and Andrew Molina. We got nothing available yet, but we will soon. And the first thing that I did, I recorded the baritone because it turns out me playing baritone, Andrew playing some low G, and Sammy playing high G was really freaking cool because it gave you this different profile of sound. Andrew's also got an Oli baritone, so he'll probably use some of that at some point in this too. But yeah, it's really nice to be able to link them together. I also occasionally will do a live gig where I play some Celtic music with a band called Stark Raving Plaid, and we oftentimes just do like acoustic sets. And there'll be a couple times where I bring just the baritone and standard ukulele, and the lead guy there, John Moen, can play either instrument, and so we will like trade back and forth the baritone and the standard ukulele depending on the tune. Super fun. Sounds great. Tiki Dave also says, I actually think working on the bari makes you a better tenor player. Builds chops that carry over. No question. I'm a much better low G player today than I was before I discovered the bari because I started approaching things more with that low G string. Most of the time when I play a low G, I feel like I'm just wishing I played my high just because that's my personal preference. That's just me. And so now when I play a low G ukulele, I feel more comfortable because I'm just kind of thinking of baritone concepts. So they carry over. And then Tracy says, I picked up a nice Kala Acacia contour blem a few months ago. I could never find the blemish. And increasingly, it's what I reach for. Yeah, it's awesome. It's the baritone effect. Like, oh, those students, by the way, remember I mentioned earlier how some of them were reluctant because it felt too advanced, if you go back 10 minutes or so. I've convinced a number of my students now to play baritone, and right now my teaching schedule is much smaller than it's been in the past. We've got a new baby coming. I bet, by the next live lesson, I might have a new one, definitely by 2 live lessons from now. It's going to be crazy here. But so I've only got 10 spots, and those 10 spots are bi-weekly. So I've got 20 students right now. And of those 20 students, just looking at my thing here, I'm gonna say baritone for they picked up a baritone in the last couple months, just to give you an idea. So baritone, 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 baritone. Oh my gosh, baritone. So that's 6 out of the first 10. It's not gonna be that high for the second, I don't think. Baritone, baritone, baritone. Okay, so 3 so we're looking at 9 out of 20. That's pretty good. We're looking at 40% of students have picked up a baritone. It's 45%, right? I can do math. It's too much fun to play the baritone. It's really a very different experience, yet so similar in the same. It's distinctly ukulele, yet distinctly different, and it's been a lot of fun. So it's been really fun to work on it in lessons. I've done a few more tutorials on Rock Class 101 as well as on my own Patreon page featuring baritone lessons. I'm planning on doing much more baritone lessons on my own page as well. So if you're enjoying baritone, check it out. Again, that album I did, the Baritone EP, it's available, link down below. And then I also have a tab book that I created for it that's available. We'll link that as well. That book was really fun to make, to tab out all these songs. They're pretty intricate, but there's some stuff that is beginner friendly, some pieces in it that are really fun to pick up if you've played ukulele before. And then Tracy also says, but I'm at this weird stage like you getting, but I'm at this weird stage like you get learning a foreign language where I'm translating in my head. How can I get past that? So I'm thinking in baritone. That's a great question. I don't have a great answer for you because I still am doing that math, but I can tell you I do know what the answer is. I just don't like it. And that's full immersion into baritone. So take a week or so, play only the baritone, go to a group and read the chords and play them and struggle and play them wrong. Because when you're putting yourself into that awkward position, you find the answers a little more quickly as a result. So that's my best advice is to make it uncomfortable. And that's how you'll find more comfort, ironically. YouTube Steve also says, my only baritone is a large body tenor with baby baritone strings. It's a cheap way to try it before buying an instrument. Yeah, that's great. I do think that the baritone size does give an element of resonance that a smaller size won't quite, but you're getting very similar results. And so Craig Chi and Sarah Maisel have like a baritone set that you can get for standard ukulele and stuff too, which is kind of fun. So Tiki Dave says, last thing, I don't want to hijack the chat, but for those that want to dabble in bari, can convert one of their tenors with some baby baritone strings, slightly less resonance, but still great. And then YouTube Steve said, I like the way you think, Tiki Dave. Absolutely, as I just mentioned, I don't have a set of them right here. But they make different types of ones too. They make like a re-entrant baritone, so it's got a high D, so it plays more like a high G ukulele. I tried those for a little bit, and there's a novelty to them, but it wore off quickly for me just because I just fell into all my old same habits I play with high G, which if I were playing in a group and wanted a different sound, or maybe I was recording more and wanted a different tone profile, then I could really dive into. But for me, it was just like, I guess I'll just play high G, right? And so I never tried a baby baritone set where it was the linear, same tuning as a normal baritone on tenor. But yeah, it's absolutely a great way to try some baritone stuff and see if you like it. You know, the best thing I can liken this to is if you are an audio person or home theater person, or, you know, whatever. If you get a pair of speakers and you get some itty bitty speakers, you know, they sound a little tinny and thin, and then you get bigger speakers and they sound more full, right? Because of the bigger body. But then you go from just bigger speakers to bigger speakers and a subwoofer, and it's mind blowing how big of a difference that subwoofer can make, right? Especially in like a home theater setup. It's like, oh no, my soundbar's got enough bass. Then you hook up a subwoofer. It's like, oh, whoa, right? That's kind of what I think of with the baritone and the larger body of the instrument. If you do the baby baritone strings, you'll get bigger speakers, so to speak. You know, it'll have more bass, but to really get that that bass response, the baritone body really gives you that, just, you know, sustain for days. So, and before I end the stream, I'm going to play a little bit of another tune off my album. This is an arrangement of Shenandoah, and I actually did a lesson of Shenandoah on my YouTube channel, and then I got my baritone. I was just playing through the things I was playing at the time, which included this arrangement I did as a lesson, and I loved it. I changed it quite a bit. You can find the lesson on my YouTube page for Shenandoah, but the tab is available in the tab book. I'm not going to play the whole thing. It's kind of long, but it sounds something like this. Love the baritone, so much resonance. Got another message in chat while I was playing that saying, I love your Oli baritone. Me too. These Olis are something incredible, and really I fell in love with playing. And so we'll have links to all of that available down below. If you're watching this as a recording, we do these live streams now every second Thursday of the month at 3 o'clock Pacific time. That's what's going to be working with our new baby on the way and everything else. And so I'll be looking forward to seeing you all throughout the rest of this year in 2025, going into 2026 as well. It's a lot of fun. And if you have questions that you'd like to have answered, be sure to leave them in the forum post. Every week that forum post will go out early so that you can actually leave your comments on it in case you miss this. But if you miss the live stream and you have got a comment, leave it down in the chat below and we'll be sure to answer it. So YouTube Steve said, congratulations on the baby on the way, Matt. Thank you so much. Pretty exciting. We're getting to crunch time. I'm actually in my new studio area right now because my son moved to my old studio area because his room is becoming the nursery. It's crazy over here. But the baritone is, I think, the first ukulele I'll play for our second kid. We'll see. I'll keep you posted. So thank you so much for attending. As always, if you have any questions, leave them down in the comments below. I'll look forward to seeing you next time. Take it easy.